Bonsuelo athletes, today we're going to talk about direct and inverse variation. And I just want to point out something. When do you know to do what we're about to do today? When the problem somehow indicates it's a direct or inverse variation. You don't just kind of do this any time. If it talks about a direct variation, you do a direct variation. If it talks about an inverse variation, you do an inverse variation. Okay, what's the idea? The basic idea is this. Direct variation, as one thing gets larger, the other thing that it's associated with gets larger. And an inverse variation, as one thing gets larger, the thing it's associated with gets smaller. In other words, with the direct variation, the two things basically change in the same direction. Whichever way one changes, the other one changes the same way. So if one gets bigger, the other gets bigger. If one gets smaller, the other gets smaller. On an inverse variation, as one gets bigger, the other one gets smaller. And as one gets smaller, the other one gets bigger. In other words, they change in the inverse direction, the opposite direction from each other. Okay, the main thing I want to emphasize is this thing, this K. Okay? I'm going to erase it in a second, but it's in every single one of these. And what is that? K is called the constant of variation. Okay? And what it allows us to do, and you only use this with a direct and inverse variation. What it allows us to do is write an equation that's a variation. Okay, now, direct variation is one gets bigger, the other gets bigger. An example of this, but it's just an example. There can be all sorts of examples. Y varies directly as the square root of x. So you have y. Varies is a verb. So remember, a verb's an equal sign, but this is a special verb. Varies isn't just equals, it's equals k. And then the square root of z. Okay? So k is the constant of variation. All right. And then how are we going to use these equations? We'll get to in a little bit. Okay. Y varies inversely. Okay, so what happens? Not y, sorry, w. W varies again as equals k. But if it's inversely, you divide. So it's k divided by d cubed. Okay? And again, I'll go through an example of these eventually. Joint variation is just a joint variation with two or more values. So again, we have x varies is equals k, and then jointly, which means multiply, because it's a direct variation, as f and m. Okay? And then a combined variation is a direct and an inverse variation in a single equation. So r varies, again, as equals k, directly as f, so you multiply by f, and then inversely as m and z, so you divide, as m and x. So you divide by m and x, okay? And I really want to emphasize that you not use the explain button in ALEKS. I don't know why I mentioned for section 8.1, but that's interesting. But this is, what is this? This is section 8.5. So I suggest you not use it for section 8.5. Okay? All right. Again, this probably isn't going to make a lot of sense until I actually, show you how to do a problem, which will be in the next file. So, see you in a few minutes.